first of all, Dave, you good?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're all in a time of uncertainty, but you've got to remain philosophical and positive and do what you can.
Yeah, certainly, mate. And all the family safe and well as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're all, my brother's in pretty good stead. He's in the healthcare industry, hasn't been affected. My mother's in our bubble here, my partner, her son. And so we can't complain. We've got our health, and I'm just focusing on how we recover from it.
Definitely, mate. I think it's important to stay positive through the tough situation, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Now, could you talk to us a little bit about, just to start off the interview, I mean, how did you sort of first come into the boxing game? Could you give us a bit of an insight into your background, please?
Yeah, so I never really knew what I wanted to do for work, and I kind of fell into event promotion by chance, and that's not managing events, but thinking of an idea for an event and then trying to make it happen, and collecting the revenue, TV, tickets, sponsorship, paying the costs, and hopefully making a profit. And if that doesn't work out, obviously you make a loss or go bankrupt. And so I started really small, trial and error, and doing business events and then charity events, big name speakers. And I was nearly going to give up and nearly went bankrupt. But I saw a movie by Spike Lee, When We Were Kings, a documentary about Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman, The Rumble in the Jungle. And it inspired me to have a go at putting on a boxing event. And there were two big name New Zealanders at the time who'd been talking about fighting for a number of years, but the fight was never made to happen. And people thought it never would. One was David Tua, who has knocked out 4 world champions and fought Lennox Lewis for the world title, but never won a title. One of the biggest punchers ever. Another was an up-and-comer who hadn't been beaten, named Shane Cameron. And, you know, people called it, the New Zealand media called it the fight of the century. And so I thought, look, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going nowhere with this. I may as well roll the dice and try put on the biggest boxing event in New Zealand history. Now, I didn't have a boxing background, and so it was a crash course in boxing people, trainers, coaches, managers, promoters. We're all mad. In dealing with media, it was a massive media event, and I'd never really dealt with media before, so I had to learn all of it on the fly. And the amount of money we guaranteed was more than every boxing person in New Zealand history put together, and we had to cash flow fund it. We're trying to sell tickets, so it was off a hunch that it would be big. It was the first pay-per-view event on New Zealand soil, and it ended up making history. Luckily, we were right, and it was huge, so it set a record. Everyone got paid, and it's still a record to this day. David Tua won in a devastating fashion, and that really got us into sport. And we realized that, you know, in sport you have many more revenue streams. There's a big market for live sport, and you've got TV, international TV, corporate sponsorship, government, tickets, hospitality. So it's perhaps more opportunities than other events, say concerts. You only got one revenue stream really in tickets, and the act, the musician, tends to take all the money. So it's probably a bit even riskier than boxing in some ways.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, what an outstanding first event to put on, first of all, David. I mean, you must have been so proud. I mean, how many years have you sort of been doing it for now?
Well, that fight was October 2009, so just over 10 years in the boxing business to date.
And I mean, was there ever sort of any history of the sport of boxing in your family beforehand, maybe through fighting or promoting?
Well, my father walked away when I was born, so I have no idea of that background. There may or may not be.
Yeah.
My mother's side is Irish, and Irish are known as scrappers.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you know, they were in County Clare, and there was famine, the occupation, the black and tans, and so on, and in the IRA years, etc. So again, I'm not too sure, but before that first event, the most I knew about boxing was watching Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, etc. in the late 1990s.
So have you very much been sort of a fan of the sport yourself personally, have you? Yeah, Dave?
I wouldn't say that either. that the first event was an inspirational idea that came as a business opportunity. It was, we were fed up of doing small events and nearly going bankrupt, and we just had a hunch, one, that we could put this together, and second, we ran the revenue streams and had some assumptions, and we thought it was a good opportunity, and it proved right. And that got me into understanding boxing. I mean, it's complicated, and you learn more and more year after year. It's not for the faint-hearted. I don't think anyone on the streets can walk in and run a boxing event, and we were very fortuitous that our assumptions were correct.
And I mean, it was definitely a hunch that paid off, might I say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you've said now it's been sort of 10 years that you've been involved in the industry yourself. How much has the promotion game changed since you first started, from your personal point of view?
A great deal. So, you know, over the history of boxing, you have highs and lows, and, you know, people will say, you know, there's Joe Louis or whatever, Rocky Marciano, I don't know, people will say, oh, boxing's fading away, and then suddenly Sonny Liston comes along and they're fading away, and then there's a Muhammad Ali, and boxing's the biggest thing in the world. Then after Muhammad Ali, in certain parts of the world, they're saying it's, you know, other sports are taking over. Then you have Mike Tyson come along, it's the biggest sport in the world. And I think it probably did fade a bit, particularly heavyweights, when the Klitschko reign, he was quite a boring fighter. The heavyweight division was sort of, the focus moved to Europe, interest lulled. I mean, US TV often didn't show Klitschko fights, but now it's getting very interesting again. All you need is a larger-than-life character like Tyson Fury to come along and shock America and shock the world, and everyone's talking about it. And the other major change is the sheer amount of money that's coming into the sport now. A lot of the terrestrial sports like baseball, basketball, Premier League soccer, football, that is, signed with terrestrial television. But you've had these these giant companies realize there's an opportunity to become, shall we say, the Netflix of sport, and run a subscriber model. And like Netflix is a giant in dramatic entertainment, you've got Facebook for social networking, Google for search. No one's really done a sort of Netflix of sport. And, you know, smart money's realised this, and there's big money flowing into that opportunity. For example, Disney Corporation, who own ESPN in partnership with Top Rank and an app, are trying to gather subscribers. And then you've got Sir Leonard Blavatnik through DAZN in partnership with Eddie Hearn and Sky Sport UK, DAZN USA, competing to do the same. And then you've got Al Heyman, Premier Boxing out of America. And the reason they tap pouring money into boxing is these other sports are all on terrestrial contracts. And so boxing is the Wild West in a way, where they can sign up fighters with big following already, and then those fighters' fans will subscribe to their service. And so it's like trying to build a telco like British Telecom in a way. And so and it's a subscriber model. So that is great for the boxers and the managers and the trainers. It's just massive cash injection of billions of dollars flowing into the sport, which is reviving it. And then add to that, take the heavyweight division, there's a lot of interesting matchups. Again, you know, we're coming into a golden era. Think back to the 90s when you had Francois Botha, Gallotta, Tyson, Holyfield, Butterbean, Eric Esch. You had Lennox Lewis, lots of characters fighting each other, trilogies, Riddick Bowe.
Yeah.
Sort of that we've got a bit of that going on. Like right now in heavyweights, you've got Tyson Fury, who I think is the best of the heavyweights, the man to beat. Then you've got Deontay Wilder. They're headed for a trilogy. Anthony Joshua, of course. You've got Joseph Parker, Dillian White, Derek Chisora. And then, you know, there's a whole lot of other names coming through. You've got Usyk who's come up. And then there's another young generation. And so I think fans are in for a golden decade of matchups.
Definitely. I mean, I agree with you. I think the heavyweight division has certainly got that good feel and that buzz back around it again, hasn't it? Like you mentioned, definitely.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, as we all know, we know you promote and manage former WBO world champion Joseph Parker. I think Joseph is still on with us. He did join us, so good evening to you, Joseph. I hope you're safe and well. Can you just tell us a bit about, before we come on to Joseph, could you tell us a bit about some of the other fighters that you promote?
Well, funnily enough, the only boxer I work with right now is Joseph Parker.
Right, okay, I see.
We were a broader event company to begin doing business events, other big sports tournaments, like, rugby sevens.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
We had a rugby league tournament like that called Auckland Nines. It was New Zealand's biggest event. Music, we got music stuff around the world. So I have promoted other boxers, and we signed Joseph from the beginning, and he's been wonderful to work with. And we were his promoter for the first 6 years of his career. At that point, the wise thing for Joseph to do was to then sign with one of the global promoters, and that was my recommendation. And so I gave Joseph friendly advice, and the management team, his management worked together and ended up appointing Eddie Hearn and Matchroom as Joseph's promoter.
Yeah.
And so Joseph's up to his third fight on the 3-fight Matchroom contract. Joseph and then retained me as part of the management team. So effectively, I'm no longer the promoter. I'm part of management, co-manager, for want of a better term.
I mean, could you just tell us a little bit about how the working relationship started between yourself and Joseph? And did you always envisage that you had a world champion on your hands?
Well, first point is that his family and Joseph and his team approached our company for some advice on how to get some sponsorship when he was an amateur, because there's very little funding for boxing in New Zealand. And, if you're trying to get to Commonwealth Games, training, equipment, there's not a lot of help.
Yeah.
They approached for some advice. I happen to know a wealthy person who loved boxing, a friend of mine. I said, hey, I could introduce you. He might put you on a sponsorship retainer and help out. That deal worked out. Anyway, Joseph didn't end up going to the Commonwealth Games and was asking us for some advice. We suggested turning professional. I'd done a few boxing events by then, one-off events, working with fighters one-off, but there was no long-term plan. So we thought, why don't we find a young guy who's good to work with, has talent, and is keen to become world champion, sign him up on a 6-year plan. We'll do our bit. We will invest heavily, get good trainers, good sparring partners. We won't hold back. We'll take risk. And if he does his bit, we might just do what's never been done in New Zealand history and win the heavyweight world title, which is what happened. And then the second part of your question, remind me?
I just wanted to know, I mean, did you always envisage that he was going to be a world champion? Always?
Well, yeah. So that's funny because I did. And, in my career, in and outside of boxing and other events, I've had some successes and failures. But on some things, I've had an intuitive feel that they would happen. It sounds a bit weird, but it's true. Like the biggest event in New Zealand, the Nines I mentioned, it was considered nearly impossible to pull off, but I knew we would. And I said to Joseph that very early on, I said, you're going to become world champion. I feel it in my bones. And when Joseph won the world title against Andy Ruiz Jr., he whispered to me in the ring, he said, you were right, brother, you were right. So that was a special moment for Joseph and the team, but it was good. It's one thing to see a goal that's considered nearly impossible for a team, but to then see it happen is an amazing achievement by everyone involved, in particular Joseph Parker.
Yeah, certainly, and it must have been, it must have felt like all the hard work from everybody had sort of paid off at that moment, and special moment, like you said.
100%, yes.
Now, you mentioned Eddie. How are things with you and Eddie now? Because we know sort of pre-AJ Parker fight, you had a few verbals, but was it all good-natured and all just part of selling the fight?
Yeah, well, look, I found Eddie Hearn good to work with. He's got a good sense of humour. He's intelligent. it's a very well-run company. Obviously, his father Barry set up the company, but it's a well-run company. There's no dodginess. There's nothing for fighters to be afraid of. They're pretty they are transparent and professional. They're good at what they do, and they've certainly grown the sport. You can't criticise him for that. And so, but Eddie and I have not really schemed like we'll say this to the media or that. What you've seen from Eddie and I has been genuine banter that not planned, but I think he knows where the line is, and you know, and in the case, say, the Joshua fight, it's helped build up interest in the fight, and it's all part of the sport. Is that sort of banter outside the ring, and you know, if you can give the banter, you've got to take it.
Definitely.
No point giving it, then complaining if it comes back. Look, I think they've been very good for the sport, and I think they'll end up, in my view, they'll become the dominant player over time.
Definitely. I mean, so it sort of just stays at sort of verbal sparring. We're never going to see maybe a charity event between Eddie and yourself stepping in the ring then. Dave, is that out the question?
I'd say Eddie will be double my weight and a foot taller, so it would breach. I don't think the British Boxing Board of Control would allow it.
Yeah, I don't think it would pass, mate. Definitely not. There's a shame. I mean, sort of coming back to Joe, what are sort of the plans for him when boxing returns? I mean, I know that we haven't got a time scale on it, but I listened to Joe quite recently on a podcast over here in the UK, where he said that he felt he's sort of 2 or 3 fights away from another world title shot again. So what sort of fights would you look for him in that time? I mean, obviously,
look, it can happen at any time. Like, I mean, look at what happens with Miller dropped out and Ruiz got called up for Joshua.
Yeah.
And so Joseph's in a healthy position because he's ranked number 2 by the WBO now, and with all these title fights, if an opponent falls over, who do you call in? Well, it's not just about rankings, it's about profile and money. And Joseph's become a household name in the United Kingdom.
Certainly,
and he shared in big pay-per-view numbers. Anthony Joshua Parker, I think, was one of the biggest pay-per-views, if not number 1 in European history.
Yeah, massive event.
02. So it means that Joseph ticks the boxes. He's got credibility, he's respected, and he has the profile. He could get the call up. Now, if he doesn't, then, for example, there's the sanction bodies. If Joshua ended up vacating WBO, then it could be Parker versus Usyk versus Parker, Usyk the mandatory for the title. So that nearly looked possible, only a few months ago. And then even if that doesn't happen, you just be patient and win. So I think with where he's ranked, the key is just it's not voodoo, you can overthink it. You can't really plan too much ahead because rankings change, injuries happen. The key with boxing, just keep fighting regularly, keep winning, and keep your ranking up and keep winning. And so I think Joe, if he wins 2 more, maybe 3, there will be a world title shot again. So that's accurate. I agree with Joseph in saying that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what we would all like to see from a fan's point of view would be maybe for Joseph to fight as you mentioned, the Usyk Chisora winner. I mean, coming to that Chisora fight that didn't happen due to the unfortunate spider bite that Joseph had. How frustrating was it all for you as a team, sort of missing out on another big fight in the UK and another step to a world title? Extremely
frustrating. I mean, you don't go to Vegas, spend a fortune on a training camp away from your family, and then make up a spider bite at the last minute. I mean, there were some conspiracy theorists, but that makes no sense. You just lose money and you lose time. So the truth is, Joseph was attacked and bitten by a spider, and medically, his body was shutting down to some extent, and he was told he was not allowed to train by the doctors, and it put him out long enough that the fight had to be put off. Our hope was the fight we put on as soon as he was ready, but then Chisora chose to go the other way and fight Usyk instead, and so that's fine. We'll go with whoever's in front of us, but it was hugely frustrating, that delay.
And how sort of far into camp was it, David, when that incident happened?
Quite deep into camp. I can't remember, but it might have been 6 weeks or so. No, it was coming up, a month out from the fight, sort of thing. Otherwise, he could have recovered and continued, but it was just on the cusp of leaving to go to the United Kingdom. So, there was no choice in the matter.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I suppose you've got full confidence in your man that he can become a world champion again soon. I mean,
100%.
which of the belt, sorry Dave, which of the belt holders would you like to see him in with? Would it be the AJ fight again or in with Tyson Fury? Which would you prefer to see, personally?
Joseph's agnostic about who he fights, so am I. Doesn't matter who. Like, if you're a boxer and you've trained your whole career for a title shot and you've risked your health, I tell you what, if you get a title shot, you take it.
Yeah.
And anyone who dodges it, they need their head checked. Because it's so hard to get a title shot and so many things could go wrong.
Yeah.
The opportunity could be lost. You take the shot. And so it doesn't matter who, he'd fight anyone. He'd fight Tyson Fury because he sees it as business. You could still be friends. But Tyson sort of ruled that out, saying they're a bit close.
Anyway, I mean, that brings us nicely on to what I was going to ask you next, Dave. Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, you mentioned the relationship between Joseph and Tyson there is very much a good friendship, very much a good bond. Do you think that would affect Joseph's mindset if they were ever to fight, or would it be very much two professionals just doing their job?
Well, we've discussed it, and I think from Joseph's perspective, it would be two professionals doing their job, have a beer afterwards. I mean, it's a profession. But everyone's different. And some people... it's up to the individual boxer to describe how they feel about that scenario.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's sort of, Joe has very much been Mr. Positive, shall we say, during such a difficult time at the moment, with all the videos that we've been seeing from himself. Even seen little cameos from you as well, Dave, joining in. Have you enjoyed that?
Oh, well, no, I didn't enjoy doing it. It was a painful experience trying it and again. I came out all right because the editor, Kerry Russell, was so good at his job. But, I think only Joseph enjoys doing those.
Definitely. But do you feel that it's been sort of important, and it's kept people having sort of positive mindsets and keeping their minds healthy? Do you think it's been an important thing that Joseph has been trying to do?
Yes. I mean, the whole series of the 6 videos had an underlying message of being kind to one another in the bubble or the household and staying safe. And it sort of gave him something to do. He enjoyed doing it. It had the underlying positive message, and it was also good for his profile, I guess, because a lot of the videos were trending even on the BBC and Sky Sport UK, etc.
Yeah.
And so it's good for the relationship with fans, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just wanted to sort of ask you, from your side, I mean, British boxing fans have a name for being some of the most passionate and, best in the world, shall we say. How is the perception of boxing over in New Zealand? Is it very much a growing sport?
Well, it's massively grown. Since 10 years ago, it was considered a bit dead, niche, low rent, in tin sheds sort of thing. That was after David Tua had gone quiet for a while, but now it's some of the TV audiences are as big as All Black rugby games, and some are bigger. And so it depends. But when there's a big event, you might get half the country watch. 2 million viewers would probably watch Joshua Parker. Many times there'd be 1 million viewers. So it's become mainstream. There's a lot more fitness gyms offering boxing. There's a lot more understanding of it and its role in society.
Definitely. What is, for your own personal point of view, David, what has been the proudest moment of your career to date? Was it that night that sort of Joseph had achieved the dream that you all believed would happen together?
I don't know. I mean,
it's a tough one, is it?
I know. I mean, the pinnacle. I mean, from when we set out, the hardest thing of everything we achieved was winning the world title was a step on the way, but to then challenge to unify the titles against Anthony Joshua at Principality Stadium in Wales. One, it was a unification heavyweight bout between two world champions. Two, no New Zealander had previously got there. Three, it was a joint venture event between Matchroom and Duco, our company. It was probably the biggest audience to ever watch a New Zealand sporting performance. It was the biggest ever single payday by a New Zealander for a one-off event. It was the biggest pay-per-view in European history. It was the second biggest event in the world by revenue outside the United States. So it broke multiple records. Now, Joseph didn't win the fight, but just getting there was, like shooting for the stars and actually getting there. And, had Joe left a bit more in the ring, it might have been different, and hopefully he gets the opportunity to do it again.
Definitely, that's something that we hope will happen as well. When boxing returns, we obviously don't have a time scale on that, unfortunately. What are the plans moving forward for David Higgins and Duco events?
Well, everyone's wondering when events will be allowed again. In New Zealand, our government seemed to have handled the pandemic pretty well in terms of death rates, etc. There's been a proper lockdown quickly, and so there's hope that events can return later in the year. And I think in other countries like the United States, I think Trump has been shocking, and they may be delayed a lot longer. We'll have to see. But, for us, we have to scenario plan. What happens if there are no events this year? Can we run boxing with limited numbers, 100 people or 500 people with TV, or even no audience with television? But then if events are suddenly allowed, we switch to an audience model and television. And so you have to kind of have two scenarios or three going at the same time. But for now, I don't have a single event for 6 months or more. And all of my staff, some I've unfortunately let go, and others are on reduced wages and, working from home, obviously. But everyone understands we're all in it together, and we're positive. Like, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're very good, talented young boxer, and Joseph Parker, he's the youngest of the big name heavyweights. He's still only 28, and they say a heavyweight doesn't reach their prime until 31. And a good partner in Matchroom and a solid contract. We have some good other opportunities outside of boxing and music and rugby league, and so it's like being in hibernation. And then once we know when events will be allowed again, then all hands on deck. We're getting our events up again and going again.
Yeah, it's been very much a difficult time for everybody, isn't it? Finally, David, what have you sort of learned about yourself during quarantine? Is there anything that you have learned about yourself personally?
Listen, I mean, there's some things I haven't done in a long time. I was going a bit stir crazy, developing cabin fever, so I bought a bike and I've started cycling again. And there's not many cars on the road, so it's been good to get off some steam that way. I've actually started cooking some meals again, and people who know me, that'll shock. I mean, I went through a period of eating every meal at a cafe or a restaurant, and so I've learned it's slightly therapeutic to sort of cook something and then eat it, so that's been new. I've laid off the drink a bit. It's...
What's your sort of what's your favourite drink then, Dave? What does Dave Higgins like to sit and drink when he can?
I've never met a drink I didn't like. But,
good man.
The mixture, I think the work pressure, plus being cooped up and drinking is a bit of a heady mix, and so it sort of got to the point where I was backing it up the next day, and then I took my eye off work a bit. So I'm in another dry spell at the moment, and then I find I'm spending more time, exercising or reorganising work stuff or doing what I have to do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just before we finish, Dave, it's something we've been doing with anybody from the boxing world we've been interviewing. We finish with a bit of a 50-50 game. Now, are you happy to go over there? Basically, I give you two options. and you pick your favourite. You happy with that,
Is
Dave?
it boxing? Is it boxing related?
It's in general, so I might throw
Good,
anything
that's
up
fine,
to you.
'cause I was going to say I'm not an expert on boxing. So
Yeah,
if
no,
general,
it's
we can.
just
And what if I'm
generalising,
saying
yeah.
yes or no or something?
So it's basically I'll give you two options and you just pick your favourite. I won't stitch you up, Dave, don't worry.
Yeah. Okay, so
Right, okay, so a New Zealand barbecue or UK five-star hotel food?
New Zealand barbecue.
Is this something you get to do often with the family?
Yeah, and it's more. Yeah, I mean, I've had various living situations. At the moment, I'm in a smaller place, and so I haven't had one in a while. But you know, when I've had barbecues in outdoor areas, I've done it quite often.
Great stuff. Rugby or football, or soccer as you may call it?
Football, soccer.
Soccer. Do you have a team in particular?
When I lived in Ireland in 1993 and supported Manchester United because all my cousins and family in Ireland most of Ireland were Man United fans.
Yeah, quite a strong allegiance there.
You had Irish guy, a lot of Irish guys in there, yeah.
Do you prefer to sit down and watch a film or a series or a box set?
I'd prefer a good movie that's fact-based, or, you know, a series has to be bloody good to devote that much time to it.
Any personal favourites to throw out to us, Dave?
I don't know. All sorts of good movies. But when I was a kid, Indiana Jones was my favourite.
That was your favourite?
Now, now anything that's had got a good, that Spotlight that the award winner that took down the church in Boston was interesting. One I watched recently.
Yeah, definitely. Cardiff Principality Stadium or Wembley? Now I know you've experienced Cardiff Principality Stadium yourself, so is that the one for you?
If I was an event promoter, I'd rather hold an event at Principality because one, that has a roof and that takes the weather out of play. Therefore, it's low risk and the fans aren't going to get rained on. But secondly, it's lower cost because you don't have to build the gigantic shelter over the ring, which, trust me, we had Jeff Horn fight Manny Pacquiao in Brisbane, Australia. You can spend hundreds of thousands on that ring. And I think the capacities aren't that different. Wembley would fit a few more people.
Yeah.
But by tinkering with ticket prices, you could drive the same revenue out of Principality. And that night when Joshua fought Parker, it looked spectacular. And a memory for our team is the Welsh fans and English singing that Seven Nation Army, reverberating around the venue. It was shaking the ground almost. 80,000 people or close to it.
So a special atmosphere you'll never forget, Dave, is it?
Yeah.
Last few questions. A beer at the pub with Joseph or Joseph cooking a home meal for you?
Say that again?
So a beer at the pub with Joseph or Joseph inviting you over to cook a meal for you?
I've had many beers at the pub after fights, but I'd like to see him cook, so I'll take the second option just for my amusement.
What are his cooking skills like? Are they non-existent?
No, that's my point. I've never seen it, so I'd like to.
Great stuff. Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali?
I think I'll take Muhammad Ali, and the reason is that, in the ring he was a genius, and he was one of the greatest, even not having the most power or the biggest punch at the time. He was still dominant for a very long period. And secondly, outside the ring, he was a giant politically and standing up for what was right. And Tyson, no disrespect, he had more power, and in his prime, he was a dangerous, could have killed anyone.
Devastating fighter, yeah.
Might have even beaten Ali in his prime, right? But his prime was a lot shorter, and outside the ring, he did some bad things. And, whereas Ali was a giant of the century, politically, what he stood for, and in the ring, and for a long period of time. And so I think Ali deserves to go down as possibly one of the greatest, if not the greatest athlete of the past century.
Yeah, well said, mate, well said. Last two then, Dave. Eddie Hearn or Bob Arum?
Oh, look.
To work with.
Arum's the incumbent greatest promoter of all time, and he's very shrewd. He's a Harvard doctorate in law. We've done good business with Bob Arum, and he's funny. He's very smart. Great. I enjoyed asking him about stories and history. I love talking to older people. I think Arum's nearly 90, about stuff that happened 50 odd years ago. It's like, imagine one of those giant ancient tortoises, and you could ask them what was going on 100 years ago and hear it from the tortoise's mouth. So, and then with Eddie, we've had great banter and humour, and he's probably going to go on to become the greatest promoter. And so, we've had great experiences and good results with both. At the moment, we're with Eddie Hearn, and so, if I had a gun to my head, I'd edge a little towards Eddie at the moment. But hey, you've got to keep your options open.
Certainly, certainly, definitely. And last one, now, two of the sort of pound-for-pound best in boxing, or they are the two pound-for-pound best in my opinion, is Canelo and Lomachenko. Now, if you had to pick one to promote, who would you pick and why?
Look, I don't pretend to be an expert, and I probably know more about the heavyweight division. So for me, that's a hard question because I haven't studied each boxer. I might be wrong, but I think Lomachenko, Canelo's had more experience. We've seen more of him. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have.
Lomachenko's showing genius at now, and if he goes on to improve further, Lomachenko might go down as the greatest. So again, if I had a gun to my head for the sake of the question, I'll edge towards Lomachenko, but I'm no expert.
Well, I just want to say, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure for being able to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Yep, great, no problem at all.
And I wish you and your family all good health. I wish you, Joseph, and the team all the very best, and we look forward to catching up with you soon, hopefully.
Great. Hey, same to you, and good luck with the channel.
Thank you very much for joining us, mate. Thank you.